unfortunately, we're in a situation today where some airlines are so needing pilots that they're putting these accelerated programs together where people can pay a whole lot of money and get put into an accelerated track. Right. And then all of a sudden they find themselves in the cockpit of a passenger carrying aircraft. And as a captain, I got to fly with a couple of these people and evaluate them. And I want to tell you, Brett, it was not pretty. These people, although they had the technical skills, they could program the aircraft to fly from point A to point B, and they understood all of the technology. When it came down to basic seat of the pants flying, they didn't have those skills.
How many of you knew all that was happening in commercial aviation? Hey everyone, our country is at a severe inflection point in the aviation industry and also in the culture itself. We take the wrong turn and the consequences may be unrecoverable. We maintain aircraft control, analyze the situation, and take the proper action, and we can recover this unusual attitude. Aviators, you know what I mean.
There have been a few airline executives over the years that truly think that it's safe to have pilots that are basically trained to proficiency, and they will try to cut costs and cut safety measures, do anything they can for the bottom line, just the bottom line of the airline, for the airline to be profitable and make a lot of money, thinking that we can basically put anybody up there that's willing to go there. And again, this is not where we need to be. You want those crew members up front to be as highly trained and as experienced as they can possibly be. And you get that experience like I did and like you did. You go through what's called paying your dues, and you gain the experience. And these are the things that you carry with you through the rest of your career, and that helps you to become.
I think you're right too, because I flew. I think I flew for over 20 years as an Air Force pilot before I got into the airlines. And you're absolutely right. It's easy enough going through a syllabus to develop the technical skills that you need. Can I program the FMS? Can I make the heads-up display work? Can I make all of this stuff in front of me and all these buttons overhead? Do I know what they all do? Yeah, sure. But then when it comes to the judgment that years of experience brings, that's where it's tough. And I think too that's where one of the responsibilities of being a flight instructor, because in the military and also in the civilian world, I was a flight instructor like you for forever. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things we try to do for our students is kind of pour some of our own experience into them, because it's going to take them a while to gain it. So anything you can do to help is going to be a big deal to get them up to speed. I actually did the same thing as you did, flying with people who paid money to get some flying time. Not really experience, but just some flying time. And I think my observation was about the same as yours. I saw the people were able to, manipulate the controls, were able to do things with the airplane, land it. But as far as the judgment was concerned, just aeronautical decision making, not so much.
Yeah, that's something that you really have to gain with lots and lots of hours of flying in different types of airspace, different, traffic congested airspaces. Some of these people have never experienced that. And when you get thrown into it, as you said, you can make the automation work and, you can hang in there. But when things start to go wrong, and they do, and I'm sure you've heard this this saying that aviation is hours and hours and hours of boredom interspersed with a few seconds of stark terror.
That's what we say about the flight test business. Same kind of thing. Yeah.
And so when those terrifying moments come, you want somebody in that seat and in command that is really going to be calm, cool, and collected, and is able to handle it properly. It was a flight from Washington International Airport, DCA, which has very short runways, as you know. And this is when I was back in the right seat of the Airbus, And we had, as a passenger, we had Senator Oberstar, who was very, very instrumental in getting some significant safety changes made at the FAA. I'm sure you remember that. And this was after a horrific accident that happened, and he wanted some significant changes put in there. And he was able to make that happen, which is a very, very good thing. And so we're getting ready to fly this thing. And another passenger was Richard Anderson, who at the time was the CEO of Northwest Airlines. And he wanted to ride in the cockpit with us.
Sure.
And he's allowed to do that. He's allowed to do that as the CEO. The captain was a little reluctant to do that, but I said, Captain, this is our one and only opportunity to really nail this guy down on some things. Let's do it. He said, okay, we'll do that. So I'll try to keep this story short, but it's blizzarding outside, and the temperature is like 16 degrees.
Nice.
The snow is blowing. Richard Anderson is sitting there in the cockpit with us, watching us go through everything that you need to do to get a passenger jet safely airborne in the middle of a blizzard, which has a lot to do with, de-icing the wings and the tail. Yeah, we had to de-ice, and so we're coming up on what's called a holdover time, meaning that you either got to go back and de-ice or you got to take off. And so, we're next in line for takeoff, and the tower is calling us and saying, you're next in line for takeoff, but we got a question for you. What's that? Do you have Senator Oberstar aboard? Yes, we do. And they said, well, we have a change to your clearance when you're ready to copy. I said, ready to copy. And the change in clearance was, after airborne, you are cleared direct to the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport, which was our destination. Nice. So they knew that he was on board that aircraft. And, when you got somebody with that much clout as a passenger, things happen. So we get cleared to take off. And I mean, it's really, really nasty outside. In fact, the captain was questioning whether we were safe to take off or not because the runway was covered in snow. Yeah. And so we made the determination that although it was covered in snow, the runway was not contaminated. Yeah, sure. If the runway is contaminated, then it's not safe to take off. It was dry snow, so the runway was considered to be slippery. And, Richard Anderson is sitting here watching us go through all of this stuff. And, we make the determination that, it's safe to go. So we roll down the runway and we're taking off in the middle of a blizzard. And sure enough, as soon as we become airborne and the captain calls for gear up, we had a cockpit emergency. Lights started going off in the cockpit. It turned out to be nothing significant. It was a problem with one of the wing de-icing valves. But it still makes bells and whistles and lights go off. And so the captain says to me, he says, you have the aircraft and air traffic control. I will handle the emergency. Roger, Captain. So he goes
standard way of splitting the cockpit.
Exactly. And Richard Anderson is sitting there watching us do all of this. So 5 minutes later, we're on top of the clouds now. We're in the clear. The emergency has been resolved and the captain's ready to come back into the loop. So I briefed the captain on who we're talking to and where we are. And then I turned around and I looked at Richard Anderson sitting on the jump seat. And I looked at the captain and I said, Captain, do they really pay us enough to do this?
Oh, yes.
And Richard Anderson jumped in right away. He said, man, I watched you guys. He said, I have a lot of respect for everything you guys do in the cockpit. And he said, there has to be hard lines in the sand for safety. Yeah. And there are some hard lines, but unfortunately, some of those lines are being broken. Yeah, that airplane is scrutinized constantly. And, there are mechanics that are looking at that thing between flights. Either the captain or the first officer is required to do a cursory pre-flight before each and every flight. I mean, it's It's that big of a deal. So look for something that's loose or something that might be leaking. And, airplanes aren't perfect. Things break. And so we have a big, thick manual in the cockpit. I mean, it's thick. It's like 4 inches thick. And it's called the minimum equipment list. And so when something breaks on the aircraft, then you consult the MEL or the MEL, as we sometimes called it, to see if you were safe enough to operate the flight. And so with the redundancies that there are on aircraft, you can have things that are broken, and sometimes major things, even things like generators that can be broken and put on a deferral list, and you can safely operate the aircraft for a certain number of hours, a certain number of landings, until that part is fixed or replaced. And, Brett, you were in the FAA. You know how it works. It's all about data collection. They have a huge data safety base called this SMS, Safety Management System. Everything goes into that database, and they're looking for signals. And mainly what they're tracking is aircraft stuff, the parts, what happens to aircraft, any emergencies, engine failures, parts wearing out prematurely. But what are they not checking? Personnel. And they should be.
We're buried right now in our country with a variety of red flags that we're seeing, not only in the aviation industry, but also in the culture at large. And as aviation professionals in the National Aerospace System, but it's otherwise known as the NAS. A lot of folks are aware that some things are going on. They may have seen some things in the news, regardless of your ideology. You may have seen some things that are happening. The first red flag that I'd like to talk about now with you, Captain Doctor, is DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
This is commonly called DEI, like I said. But first, just some definitions so that everybody knows, where we're coming from. I'll go ahead and give a couple of those. Diversity, I mean, that makes sense. It's the presence of a variety of people, ideas, thoughts in the workforce. Some of those attributes, they could be sex, age, religion, country of origin, even opinions. Is some of the things that we can talk about with diversity. Fine. I'm going to skip equity, and we'll come back to that because that's where I think this conversation really needs to head next. But then is inclusion, and inclusion is fine. That's a corporate experience where everybody feels included, their voice matters, and they just feel pretty much like they're fully integrated into the business, into the company, and that's fine too. But where I take issue with, particularly the aviation field, is equity. Mm-hmm. And one of the most common definitions of equity in this case is that you get equal outcomes in a given situation for whoever enters that situation. Let's keep in the back of your mind for now that situation might be a person who wants to enter pilot training. And we're not talking about experience here. We're talking about at the end of the pilot training pipeline where everybody gets the same outcome. So here's what we need to figure out now. That I'm convinced that DEI, at least in the aviation industry, there's a good chance that if you follow DEI principles exclusively, we could cause some fatalities. How do you see that happening, Kevin, from the captain's chair?
Well, I agree with you 100%, Brett. And, we're already seeing some signs of this. There was just a testimony that was done in Washington, D.C., where some whistleblowers came forward.
Right.
These people, work for the Boeing Corporation. And so the FAA is aware of this. And, for the longest time, the FAA didn't have any leadership after this COVID nonsense.
Yeah.
Because
right.
The administrator resigned, and they had a couple of people that President Biden had appointed. This is an appointed position, by the way. And so just recently, the new administrator was appointed, and his name is Michael Whitaker. And, they really put him on the hot seat, and they demanded answers for these safety signals that are happening in aviation. They're wanting to know what is going on here. And, Michael Whitaker admitted that the FAA did drop the ball, and they need to really pay
Yeah.
close attention to what's going on with aircraft manufacturing, particularly. And he talked specifically about the culture that's involved. And this definitely has to do with DEI. These companies are trying to check boxes and put people into molds that
Yeah.
really can't be done if you want to have a safe environment for the traveling public. And this goes in all aspects of aviation, not only the people who put these airplanes together, but the people who do the final testing on these products, the people that inspect the products, the parts pipelines of where these parts are even coming from, because we know that recently there was an incident found where bogus parts even got
That's
installed
right.
in
That's right.
aircraft. And as a captain, my focus is on operating a flight as safely as possible. And that's a buzzword always in the aviation industry. Safety is our primary concern, and it is. But in order to have this safety, you've got to look at all aspects, including this concept of DEI. And I agree with you, Brett. DEI can work in some corporate environments, but I don't believe it fits well in aviation. It just doesn't fit.
Yeah. I don't think so either. But here's a practical example of that. If you're looking for an equal outcome, let's say you're in a simulator program at one of the major airlines, and you're trying to accomplish a syllabus, and that syllabus has been designed to get you from day one of school to the graduation exercise. And after that graduation exercise, you're certified in the 73900, for example. So if you've got a certain amount of money to spend on that training program, you've got a certain amount of hours that you can spend in the simulator, granted, a couple of extra cents maybe built in case you're struggling a little bit with something, and that's normal. But if you take somebody without a whole lot of experience, training, things like that would make them more highly qualified, you don't have the money to put on, double the amount of simulators to get that person through the program.
Right.
And besides, if you did do that, then you have somebody on the other end that still wouldn't have the experience that's needed, like we talked about, in the first segment of the program today, where it's a lot more than just learning how to, work flight controls, operate all the buttons. You've got to have the experience to go along with it.
Yeah, it's
You're
a lot.
Not going to get that with. Yeah, you're not going to get that with an equity program.
No, and
you feel the same way?
It's called buying your ticket. It's called buying your way in. And
exactly.
You can buy the techniques that are required to get the certificates to have you operate an aircraft of this size, but you cannot buy the experience. Can't buy it. You got to get out there and get it on your own. And that's what I'm saying here. We need to keep it safe. Get people that are highly qualified. Hire them based on demonstrated ability and skills and experience, not by checking boxes.
That's what it's all about. I agree with that 100%. So the next red flag that I'm seeing, and you alluded to it just a few seconds ago, was the death of a whistleblower. This guy was given testimony.
He was.
And then, right during a break, and he'd already said, I'm not suicidal, and he goes out and eventually he's found in his truck with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. So what do we think about death of a whistleblower and all the other whistleblowers that are coming forth about some of the manufacturing processes that are going on?
Yeah, so it takes a lot of courage to come forward as a whistleblower, and some of these whistleblowers have already testified that they've gotten death threats, and that's very concerning. So what are we looking for in terms of corporate culture here? I mean, are we just trying to improve the bottom line, or are we truly interested in producing a fully safe product? Right now, it looks like they're more interested in the bottom line. How many aircraft can we get out there for the cheapest amount of production costs? That doesn't bode well for safety in my mind.
And isn't that kind of self-defeating too? Because if you
Yeah.
take that approach over the long term, then all of a sudden a few bad things start to happen,
Yeah.
and the FAA comes in and shuts down your production line. So
Yeah.
what
Yeah,
did that get you?
Yeah, well, some of the bad things that have happened, and the new FAA administrator admitted that they gave some of these aircraft manufacturers self-policing authority,
Yeah.
self-government,
Familiar with that.
self-governance. You can't do that. You've got to have
Even self-reporting.
Yeah, you've got to have outside eyes looking at this constantly. And that's expensive, and but it's something that needs to be done to make sure that we continue to have the safest national aerospace system in the world. Yeah,
I mean,
well,
there are some jobs that actually need the most highly qualified people available, like pilots, your brain surgeon, tier 1 special operators. They need to be the best that we could get. How are we
Yeah.
going to fix the NAS?
well, people need to write their Congress people, their representatives in Congress, and tell them that they're aware of these problems, and there seems to be some safety signals that are showing up in the national airspace system, and we'd like to have some hearings to investigate and find out why this happened and what we can do to prevent these things from ever happening again. So it's going to have to come from within the people. It's going to have to be a grounds up thing. I would encourage anyone listening to this action steps to take. Number one, please join usfreedomflyers.org. You do not have to be a pilot. We are there to protect everyone, including the traveling public. So join usfreedomflyers.org. That way you'll be able to keep up on what we're doing on this front. And we plan to bring a lawsuit against the FAA to hold them accountable.
Yeah, the more we take time to educate the public is how that's going to happen. So I think interviews and discussions like this, as soon as people begin to understand what is actually going on.
Yeah, well, that's what we're doing. That's what we're
engaged.
doing right now, Brett. And I really appreciate the opportunity, to talk about these things, because it's all education. The more people know about what's really going on, the smarter they become, and they're not going to be fooled the next time.